another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hi, this is Dick Shanley, and for the next hour I will be reading from Sunday's March 15th issue of the New York Times opinion section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This article is written by James Jamel Bowie. The President's Alternate Universe. What if Trump were as successful as he imagined? There is an alternate universe in which Donald Trump is the popular, successful president of his imagination. In this world, Trump has a clear view of the political landscape. He knows he won a narrow victory, not a landslide. He knows that his key voters, the one who put him over the top, as opposed to the core voters, elected him to lower the cost of living and turn the page back to where it was before the pandemic. And while he has the advantage of an unpopular predecessor, he also starts the clock with a small and finite amount of political capital. The modern American public is wary, fickle, and quick to anger. The right move is to invest that capital carefully, not to gamble with the people's trust. This hypothetical President Trump would take the plan of least political resistance. He would work with the Republican majority in Congress to send a new round of stimulus checks, rehashing the most important political success of his first term and fulfilling his promise to lower costs for most Americans. He would work with Congress to pass modest tariffs on critical goods, and he would take a less draconian path on deportations, focusing, as he promised, on people in jails and prisons, the worst of the worst. And he would put hard political limits on his most fanatical aides and deputies. This Trump would give Elon Musk the run of the executive branch, and he would sideline his own desire for retribution against his political opponents, or at least channel his rage into something more productive. He would also decline to hand the management of the federal government to an ignominious cadre of hacks, apparatchiks, and television personalities. In short, Trump would reform the approach of his first term. He would still be corrupt. He would still stretch the limits of common decency. He would still be a bombastic, transgressive, and contemptuous of political norms, but he would be restrained somewhat by the practical realities of governance. And this restraint would give our hypothetical Trump the leeway to pursue his more authoritative goals, to curtail civil liberty and consolidate power over the entire federal government, courts and Congress included. From the perspective of a liberal society and constitutional government, this alternative world in which a more cautious and methodical Trump successfully builds public and political support into the United States until full-throated authoritarian regime. He would have been the worst case scenario for a second term. We are lucky then that this alternative reality is unimaginable. There is no apparent evidence that Trump is capable of even the slightest of deferred gratification. If life is a series of marshmallow tests, and he has failed one after another, and is kept afloat only by his imagined wealth and privilege. The actual Trump is so pessimistic. Sorry, readers, it's a new word for me. Solipsistic. I'll try pronouncing it. Solipsistic. So plainly consumed with narcissism, so deeply indifferent to the details of governance, and so eager to satisfy his basest impulse that there was little chance he'd ever complete the unauthoritarian consolidation of his dreams. All of this is simply to contrast what might have been, what painfully is a presidency in terminal decline, if not outright collapse. Consider the big picture. Trump is nearly as unpopular now as he has ever been. He is underwater on every issue of consequence. The Supreme Court nullified his signature economic program, and his immigration enforcement actions are so toxic with voters that they forced him to fire his head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. He has wrecked the coalition that brought him into office with major reversals among Latinos, young men, and Black Americans, and he is treading water with his core supporters. Trump insists, of course, that he is as popular as ever, but even Republican lawmakers see the writing on the wall. There have been a historic number of retirements from Congress, led mostly by Republicans. Last, but far from least, is the president's foolhardy, reckless, and immoral war in Iran, which was started with neither public buy-in nor congressional authorization. It didn't take long after the bombing began. It destroyed the elementary school, killing more than 175 people, most of them children. Nearly 2 weeks in the conflict has already grown beyond the initial limited scope. In involving other belligerents and threatening the global economy, there's no surprise then that this is also the most unpopular war in modern American history. It is tempting to think that the president's political collapse doesn't really matter, that as the Teflon Don, he suffers no particular consequence for his bad behavior. And it's true that the shamelessness, the celebrity, and the cult of personality that define Trump and Trumpism also work to buoy him in the face of political catastrophe. He might sink below water, but he'll never go under. To end the story, there is to miss the larger relationship between presidential standing and presidential power. The second Trump administration is defined by its total embrace of the imperial presidency and the unitary executive. But a key weakness of both concepts is that they treat presidential power as rigid, well-defined, and highly formal. The reality is more complicated. It may seem as if the presidents have the power to command, to issue orders, and see immediate results, but successful presidents do not order as much as they coax, cajole, and persuade, for the straightforward reason that the formal authority of the presidency is limited. A skeptical lawmaker or recalcitrant bureaucrat can derail a presidential agenda and leave the chief executive at the mercy of an angry public. It is for this reason that the most able men to hold the office of chief executive have rarely seen fit to act as tyrants, raining demands down into the rest of the executive branch. They act instead as conveners, working to align a different interest in pursuit of a single goal. Presidential standing in this paradigm is the currency that makes presidential power work. A popular and well-liked president has more resources to deploy in pursuit of his agenda. He has the informal power he needs to bolster his more circumscribed formal authority. A distrusted, divisive, and unpopular president, on the other hand, quickly finds that he's unable to work his will on political actors who are more worried about their own fates than the president's interest and appetites. And this is what we've seen with this president. A year as he gambled his political capital away in a disastrous attempt to reshape the nature of the American political system. Trump's faster voting position has curtailed his ability to pressure lawmakers into backing his agenda. See the president's empty demands for Congress to pass the Save American Act, or the ongoing shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. This rapid decline has also lowered the cost of institutional resistance to the administration's attempts to curtail civil society, and has done the same for judicial opposition, so the president's most aggressive power grabs. I do not think it is an accident that two most consequential rulings against Trump issued by the Supreme Court were decided at the president's standing entered a tailspin. You will notice that this month, after teasing the possibility, Trump has mostly stopped talking about serving as an unconditional third term. Perhaps he still intends to, or perhaps has enough self-awareness to know that he is not the triumphant leader of his imagination, that he is instead a lame duck whose White House in disarray and whose actions have plunged the world into chaos. He thought he might remake the country in his own image. Instead, he's likely to leave it like one of his casinos, broken, and in desperate needs of new management. If impeachment weren't a dead letter, then we could remove him and end his misrule. As it is, we have nearly 3 more years to live through. It's an open question whether he survive them intact. Next article is written by Nicholas Kristof. The U.S. helped create safeguards for conflicts. I fear we're now abandoning them. Is Trump leading us to a more barbarous world? Suppose Iran dispatch operatives to Mexico, where from the Texas border they fired a missile at an American base and unintentionally precariously demolished a nearly American school, killing 175 people. What if they blew a few depots, showering chemical rain on residents, then struck home schools and clinics that Iran's leader warned that death, fire, and fury would so pulverate America that it could never be rebuilt? In that case, President Trump and all of us would howl at outrageous attacks on innocent civilians, and we'd be right. After World War II, the United States helped lead a global effort to try to tame the savagery of conflict, and in particular to shield civilians. But in recent years, that veneer of civilization has seemed to slip away. After invading Ukraine, Russia bombed civilians and cut off their heat and electricity. In Gaza, Israel starved Palestinians, targeted children, and destroyed health care, education, and systems, according to UN commissions. In Sudan, the United Arab Emirates has backed a militia that has starved civilians and engaged in mass murder and mass rape. The United States supplied weaponry and in Gaza and has failed to call out the Emirates, but it still inconsistently, half-heartedly professed to uphold the laws of the war. Now in Iran, I fear may be retreating even further from the principles we once proclaimed. The attack on Iran appeared to violate international law, and Oona Hathaway, a Yale legal scholar and the president of the American Society of International Laws, because it neither had UN approval nor was necessary for immediate self-defense. Beyond that, while it's too early to be definitive, some U.S. and Israel strikes raise troubling questions about possible war crimes. The apparent U.S. bombing of a girls' school is not necessarily a war crime if it was an honest mistake, Hathaway said, but the Times report that targeting employed old data if that reflected a reckless lack of care. It might rise to a war crime, she said. Iran reported the United States had struck a desalination plant providing water to 30 villages that all the U.S. states and Israel denied responsibility. The Iranian Red Crescent Society also said the attacks hit more than 17,000 homes, 59 schools, and 14 medical centers. David Crane, an American legal scholar and former prosecutor for war crimes, said, if a site like a desalination plant were used primarily for civilian purposes, striking would be a war crime. He lamented striking it would be a war crime. He lamented that we are now in an age of lawless conflict, propelled in part by the United States. Editorial comment, if that statement is true, which it might very well be, it's sad times for us as a country. I worry that if Trump grows increasingly frustrated and exhausts the target list, he may be tempted to strike dual-use civilian infrastructure, such as the electrical grid or highways and bridges. Indeed, the president and those close to him seem to be telegraphing such an approach. We will hit them hard. That it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the world. If they do anything, Trump told reporter Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, denounce stupid rules of engagement and dismantle the Pentagon office that sought to reduce civilian casualties in war. On social media, Trump warned that if Iran obstructed the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would make it virtually impossible for Iran ever to build back as a nation again. Death, fire, fury will rain upon them. His spelling and capitalization. As Philip O'Brien, an American scholar of military strategy, put it, one might say he was threatening to commit one of the greatest war crimes in history. Other countries have noticed, while some leaders have applauded the attacks on Iran, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of Spain described the American and Israel war as Iran as reckless and illegal. Dominique de Villepin, a former French prime minister, called the American war illegal, illegitimate, ineffective, and dangerous, and urged sanctions. There are more practical reasons to oppose Trump's war. It has not toppled Iran's dictatorship, it might have strengthened it. We helped install a younger supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who may be even more hardline than his father. Blockades of the Strait of Hormuz has raised gas prices and threatened supply fertilizers. Despite immense cost in lives and treasure, both the Americans and the Iranian people seem for more to be in a worse place than before Trump started the war. Wesley Clark, retired a four-star Army general, pointed to the practical challenge and lack of strategy and told me that the war is going off the rails. Step back, though, and the legacy may be more chilling. The rules-based scaffolding meant to restrain the worst excessive of war is cracking, warned Tom Fletcher, United Nations humanitarian chief. I fear that he's right, and we're sliding deeper into a world where there are no longer any rules, as Germany's vice chancellor put it. And it is the United States that is helping to lead the way. In short, long after this war is behind us, we may remember it as part of the repudiation of the noble historical effort that we once led to limit the horror of war. If so, all humanity is the loser. When this firebrand speaks, GOP's young men listen. This article is written by Michelle Goldberg. About 2 weeks ago, James Fishback, a 31-year-old running for governor of Florida, was speaking to a packed house at the Queens Harbor Yacht Club and Country Club in Jacksonville. Every one of the room, almost 100 seats, was taken, and people were standing several rows deep around the perimeter, with more listening from the lobby outside. The crowd was mostly male and very young. Several attendees told me they were in high school. A few wore the American First baseball caps, popular with followers of Nick Fuentes, the influential white nationalist troll. Slight and bespectacled Flashback is a geeky charisma and the verbal dexterity of a former competitive high school debater. His policies are a mismatch of extreme conservatism and economic progressivism, nationalism tinged with socialism, if you will. He believes that Florida's gun laws are too strict, its abortion laws are too lax, and its public teacher pay too low. He called for a 50% sin tax on OnlyFans creators and $10,000 grants to high-performing high school graduates to buy homes and start business. Though he's the son of an immigrant, his mom is Colombian, he wants a total immigration moratorium. Most of all, Fishback has made contempt for Israel and its American lobby a centerpiece of his campaign, constantly reminding audience how much America spends on Israel when its own needs are ignored. He often calls Byron Donald, a black Republican congressman who was the front-runner in the governor's race, Aipak Shakur, a play on Tupac Shakur. Appearing on Tucker Carlson's show in January, Fishback described the sexual sadistic pleasures that pro-Israel donors give in forcing Americans to bend over for a foreign country. Carlson endorsed him and wrote, "Pretty soon, all winning Republican politicians will talk like that." After Fishback's hour-long speech, a young guy stood up to ask how he could trust the candidate to keep his promise, especially when it came to refusing money from AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Fishback claimed that 3 weeks prior, a donor had offered his PAC $500,000 if he would disavow Fuentes supporters. "I hung up the phone because I will never disavow patriotic America," he shouted to whoops and applause. Fuentes' ideology is a sneering adolescent sort of Nazism. As he said in his podcast last year, Jews are running society. Women need to shut the expletive up. Shut up. The blacks need to be in prison for the most past. In Flashback, Fuentes' followers, often known as Great Pipers, have a candidate who is serious about representing them. It turns out there are a lot of Gen Z men who have been waiting for a candidate like Fishback to come along. The Jacksonville Atlanta March was hosted by the Greater Intercoastal Republican Club, which regularly brings Republicans candidates to speak. The group's president, Laura Collins, seemed somewhat amazed by the turnout. "I was surprised to have so many young people. This is the most visible that we had for any candidate." Fishback is extremely unlikely to ever become a Florida. Most polls show with 5% or 6% of the vote. And as of January, he raised around $190,000 to more than the $45 million by Donald's, who is Donald's endorsement. He may not even be legally qualified for the office, since Florida requires to have lived in the state for at least 7 years, and Fishback registered to vote in the District of Columbia in 2020. But anyone concerned with the escalating extremism of the young right should be paying attention to his campaign and the enthusiastic crowds it's drawn. More than any political candidate, Fishback has managed to bring the paranoid, transgressive, meme-drunk spirit of the right-wing internet into the real world. Chris Rufo, a conservative operative who played a major role in Ron DeSantis' war on wokeness, is no fan of Fishback, but said that he's demonstrated a pretty sophisticated method for turning a campaign with no budget, a skeleton staff, into the most talked about campaign in Florida's politics. Fishback is tapping into an increasingly radicalized generation of Republicans. In December, the Conservative Manhattan Institute found that 31% of Republicans under 50 identify their own views as racist, and 25% that their views are anti-Semitic. For those over 50, it's only 4%. The same survey showed that a majority of Republican men under 50 thinks that the Holocaust either didn't happen or was exaggerated. That's a scary statement. Let me read that again. For those over 50, only 4% for each. The same survey showed that a majority of Republican men under 50 think that the Holocaust didn't happen. Earlier this month, College Republicans of America appointed a new political director, Carl Schimmerer, who was a Fuentes crony and Fishback admirer. James Fishback has trustworthy physiognomy, another new word, Physlognomy, physiognomy. Never heard of the word. James Fishback is trustworthy. Brian Donalds, on the other hand, is deceitful and suspicious. He posts on X. Fishback doesn't represent the mainstream of the American Party today, but he's showing us one vision of a post-Trump Republican future. After Fishback's speech, I met Jeremiah Kimmel, 22-year-old wearing one of the Blue America First baseball caps common to Fuentes' movement, and Charles Metcalf, 20. Kimmel runs a land clearing business, but seems little prospect of independent adult life. We live with our parents, he told me. We don't see any end in sight and that we're not going to own a home. Something has to change. Fuentes, he told me, gave me a political consciousness. Then he discovered Fuentes on social media and signed up to volunteer as a county chair, his first foray into politics. Kimmel insisted that he has nothing against Jews. I love everyone. But he deeply resents America's aid to Israel and laws that tar criticism of the Jewish state as anti-Semitic. He was indignant at having to certify that he wasn't boycotting legal when bidding on a state contract. At Fishback events, it was easy to see how laws meant to quash anti-Israel activism have backfired, particularly among young men who have come of age in a conservative movement that treats demands for greater linguistic sensitivity and woke tyranny. When they're ordered to watch what they say about Israel, it only imbues attacks on Zionism with subversive excitement. Just like whenever you're being raised up and your parents say to you, hey, don't do that, makes the kid want to do it even more, said Metcalf. Given everything Israel has done to earn the world's opprobrium, it isn't always easy to determine the line between legitimate criticism and anti-Semitic demonization. Wherever that line is, though, Fishback seems to delight in crossing it. Like Carlson, he often performs a slick two-step routine when it comes to Jews, baiting them and then acting affronted, even incredulous, when accused of bigotry. At a campaign stop at the University of Central Florida last month, Fishback referred to junk in school cafeterias as goyslop, a far-right term for unhealthy food that Jews foist on non-Jews. When I spoke to him before his Jacksonville rally, he insisted it was just a harmless joke. As President Trump rather eloquently said, "We do a little bit of trolling," he told me. For a decade now, Trump has shown that trolling gets attention, which is one of the most invaluable commodities in modern politics. There have always been extremists at the edge of conservative politics, conservative Nazi sympathies, neo-Confederates, theocrats, media types. Traditionally, Republican Party's relationship to these far-right figures has been an uneasy mix of pandering and embarrassment. One of Trump's innovations was to dispatch with all shame, reveling in the energy born of smashing taboos. In Trump's Republican Party, Hitlerian language about immigration and minorities have been routine. Just last week, the MAGA Congressman Andy Ogle wrote on X, "Muslims don't belong in American society." It shouldn't be surprising that young conservatives raised in a movement that celebrates cruel provocations don't see anti-Semitism as off limits. I think it's unfortunate, but the algorithm right now on the right, and the young right in particular, rewards conspiracy, anti-Semitism, and ideological slop, said Rube. No one can say for sure how much social media shapes its audience, prejudice as opposed to simply catering to them. What is clear, however, is that it's a boon to Fishback's style of politics. He engages stunts, joining Tinder to lobby the women he matches with and beefing with the popular OnlyFans model Sophie Rain. He hurls racist taunts at his enemies, writing that Don Lemon, who was arrested after reporting on a protest in a Minnesota church, is lucky he's not getting hanged in the public square. And he presents himself as one of the few Republicans bold enough to take on Zionist power. Another editorial comment, I'm a golden oldie, so when we talk about all these podcasts and what different people are saying, that's a world in which I am unfamiliar with. The day after the Jacksonville rally, Fishback went to St. Augustine, where he spoke from the bed of a pickup truck to about 100 people in an asphalt lot. As he often does, he drew elliptical links between Israel and the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking scandal. Someone recently asked him, he said, if he thinks Israel had a right to exist. I believe that American citizens have a right to exist in their country without being repulsed, without being trafficked, and without being sent to war and distorted and converted by foreign powers. When Marco Rubio all but admitted earlier this month that Israel had dragged Americans to war with them before trying to walk his comments back, it was a gift to Fishback, who presented it as confirmation of his assertions that malign Israel influence. Unlike most Republicans, he isn't shy about criticizing Trump for starting the war, demanding that he publicly explain his objectives and plans for getting out. But Fishback puts most of the blame for the conflict on Israel. Israel roped us into this war because they are too cowardly to fight for themselves, he said in St. Augustine. If they were so convinced that Iran was a threat, they could have done it themselves, but they want to spill our blood, our treasure, spend our money. As he spoke, I met Ashton Rosar, a polite 20-year-old sign language interpreter, who told me it was his first ever political rally. His ideological awakening, he said, came when Kanye West published a list of names of Jewish people who are in control of banking systems and stuff like that. He described a sense of helplessness in the face of obscene corruption he learns about online, particularly around Epstein, and said that he often struggles to discern truth from falsehood, especially given the proliferation of AI. In Fishback, he saw a seemingly credible source, a real-world politician whom he could count on to help anchor his suspicions in facts. Fishback is the guy that everybody's using for proof, he said. Ironically, given how Fishback is benefiting from the young rights Goyper turns, he's a latecomer to anti-Israel politics. In 2023, he called Barb White's book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, the best he read that year. The next year, he blasted Joe Biden for not being tough enough on Iran when he said was funding proxies that attack the Jewish state, and that is unacceptable. When I asked Fishback how views had shifted so drastically, he paraphrased Ernest Hemingway's on bankruptcy, saying, they changed gradually and then suddenly. He was disturbed, he said, at seeing free speech rights erode over Israel. Then came Israel's bombing of the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza last July, and Fishback, a conservative Catholic, called the crossing of the Rubicon. It almost doesn't matter whether Fishback's conversion was sincere. More importantly, was that it was opportune. He had been attempting to make it to conservative politics for years, efforts that have exploded in scandal and litigation in the ultra-nationalist rights. He found his growth market. In 2019, Fishback founded the high school debate program Incubate Debate, an alternative to the National Speech and Debate Association, which he claimed had been subverted by woke judges. That's why you rarely see students present arguments in favor of capitalism, defending Israel, or challenging affirmation, he wrote in a 2023 Free Press article. But by the time the article came out, as NBC News would later report, one of Fishback's largest school districts had cut with Fishback, claiming he started an inappropriate relationship with an Incubate Debate student when she was 17. They moved in together when she was 18, and she later sought a restraining order against him. So a judge denying a request, Fishback denies any wrongdoing. Fishback also spent the last few years locked in litigation with a former employer, the hedge fund Greenlight Capital, which accused him of stealing confidential information and publicly inflating his job title, among other allegations. In September, he agreed to pay the hedge fund legal costs. Just before leaving Greenlight, Fishback had formed his own company, Azoria Capital. In 2024, he started a new anti-woke fund. Its great fanfare at Mar-a-Lago. It collapsed months later. In January, a Florida judge ordered Fishback to surrender Azoria Capital stock certificates and luxury purchases to the U.S. Marshal in payment of the $229,000 he owes the green light. His Tesla has also been repossessed. Now he has reinvented himself as a populist opponent of Wall Street, Israel, and big tech, making his financial troubles part of his pitch. I'm not rich, he said in a December video, admitting, I have student loans debt, credit card debt. My car was repossessed months ago. Then he laid into his billionaire ex-boss and said, no one should be elected for governor by how much money they have in the bank, but how much fuel they have in their heart to fight for Florida families. Somehow his pivot appears to be working. After Fishback's event in Jacksonville, he went to a local Waffle House, part of a Waffle House tour he promised on Carlson's show. When he arrived a few minutes after he did, young people were swarming the place. The next day, Waffle House would ban him. I couldn't push him through the throngs to get into the restaurant, so I hung out with his crowd milling about outside. There I met 23-year-old Lisi Guio, who told me this is the first thing I've ever really shown up to share the Black Lives Matter protest. Guio, a caseworker for foster children, is a registered Democrat and a big Zohan Mamdani fan, but she says she's considering James Fishback, a candidate for governor of Florida, who supported at a White House in Jacksonville, and above right, at a campaign rally outside a golf cart and stores in Augustine. Fans waiting, there's a picture of fans waiting to meet him at a rally at Jacksonville. Guglia said she's considering changing her registration so she can vote for Fishback in the primary. She's drawn to his promise not to take money from AIPAC and to his insistent emphasis on affordability. Guio said she and her fiancé have to live with roommates because rent is so expensive and ownership unachievable. She told me that she listens to Ventus sometimes, and some of what he says makes sense to her. I would say that there are some things that he speaks for me that I agree with, especially about things not being affordable, about the elites purposely keeping the general population under their control by pricing us out of things that should be considered basic needs, said Guio. And she listens to Candace Owens, who has lately been accusing Charles Kirk's wife of complicity in a Zionist plot to murder him. My politics are kind of confused, right? She told me with a laugh. Of course there are confusing times, especially if you're young and have grown up in a country heaving from crisis to crisis, processing national breakdowns through the schizophrenic pulses of social media, understanding that something has gone horribly wrong, but not how or why. In this environment of hysteria and decoy, a podcast or a politician can go far by promising to unmask the dark forces responsible for it all. I think that most of the older generation of the Republican Party don't like him, simply because they don't think his policies are too extreme. Roxer, the sign language interpreter, said of Fishback, but Gen Z likes him so much because he has those extreme politics. Another editorial comment, again being older, the growing up when civility was a byword and compromise was a byword. The society in which we live today, civility is gone. It should be eliminated from the dictionary. They feel bugs inside them, but doctors don't know why. Something's broken if people are going to exterminators for medical help. By Andrew Siflin. He's a health and science editor. Late last year, Pat Hannon started waking up in the middle of the night with excruciating itching sensation on her legs. It was like a mosquito bite on steroids, she said. Hannon was convinced that insects were feasting on her. But every time she leaped out of the bed, turned on the lights, and leaped down the bed sheets, there was nothing. She washed her bedding, vacuumed the mattress, sprayed her legs with repellent. She called a local pest control company, but said she would pay $500 to hire a beagle that could supposedly sniff out bed bugs. She started sleeping in a recliner in the living room, thinking, they won't find me there. At her lowest moment, she considered hiring someone to fumigate her home. I was getting desperate, she said. I thought, oh, so what? I'll get lung cancer. At least the itching might stop. Hannon went to urgent care with her problem, as it would have taken months to get an appointment with a dermatologist. The physician told her that he didn't see anything wrong with her. I felt like an idiot, she said. I thought I have to convince this guy that I'm not crazy, but he spent 2 minutes with me, and then he was gone. Like many Americans, Hannon was living without a diagnosis to make sense of her suffering. Over the past 8 years, I interviewed dozens of patients, doctors, and other experts for a book, examining why a person's search for health answers can stretch on for months, years, or even a lifetime. For too many people, diagnoses are delayed or incorrect or not made at all. Without one, people struggle to get effective treatment and insurance coverage. Desperate for relief, some turn outside the medical system for answers, a precarious, isolating place to be. The diagnosis crises affect millions of Americans, according to a report by the National Academies of Science. Most people experience at least one diagnostic effort in their lifetime, sometimes with devastating consequences. This kind of impasse can be especially common for people with so-called medically unexplained illnesses or conditions marked by many symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, but few visible signs, rashes, test results. Because of the extraordinary medical advances, there are now a wide range of tools for which to diagnose people, from sophisticated imaging to genetic sequencing. That makes it all the most fraught when doctors still can't figure out what is going wrong with someone. Patients feel frustrated or dismissed. Physicians feel uncertain about their ability to help the person in front of them. Desperate for relief, Hannon also researched out to local insect researchers. One of her messages landed in the inbox of Gail Ridge, an entomologist who identifies pests, with her colleagues Kathleen Dugas at Kinetic Agriculture Experiment Station, a state-funded research institution in New Haven. On a typical day, they greet farmers bringing them ticks, real estate agents, mysterious roaches, and anxious homeowners concerned about a weird bug. But staying in the early 2000s, Ridge more regularly saw a different kind of visitor, people convinced that bugs were not inside their homes, but on or inside their bodies. At first, there were 1 or 2 such people a year, then dozens, then hundreds. In 2025, Ridge says she reached 1,610 inquiries from such people. After doing some research, she learned that some of them might suffer from delusional infestation, an unshakable belief of being infested by insects or parasites. Many of the potential DI cases that Ridge now encounters are referred to by perplexed pest management professionals or concerned family members who find her online. 2017, Eric Boldman, a journalist for STAT News, wrote a moving profile of Ridge, and the story brought many more people into her. Sometimes they have mutilated themselves to extract the phantom parasites. She's seen suffering from all kinds, women in their 50s, veterans, business owners, homeless people. This is a condition that will humble any person in any walk of life. She haunted by the case of a rejected cancer researcher who believed that insects were burrowing under his skin. He tried medications, exterminators, even soaking himself in a bathtub of insecticide. These people are in the middle of a battle zone in their lives, Rich said. They are suffering from something unexplained, and the medical profession has let them down. In the United States, healthcare is often fragmented, leaving patients to shuttle information among specialists who may not communicate with one another. For conditions that are ambiguous and don't fit neatly into one specialty, this lack of coordination can be a major obstacle to a diagnosis and recovery. Insect experts like Ridge and end up seeing people who clearly need help, medical or psychological, but have nowhere to send them. Appointments can take months to book. Some doctors simply don't want those referrals. Rich believes that the vast majority of the people who seek her help have something physically wrong, like an undiagnosed medical condition, but is misidentifying the case. Later, she may learn it was autoimmune disease, an allergy, nerve damage, or a thyroid condition, all of which can produce an itching or even crawling sensation. Typically, she said, she sees more cases around periods of uncertainty. For instance, in the 2008 financial analysis, the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2024 presidential election. I was in many ways unwillingly brought in because I am the entomologist, she said. But in the end, for many of these people, but she also realized if she didn't find the way to help them, no one would. Delusional infantation is one of the darkest embodiment of the chaos that accompanies medical uncertainty. While it's an extreme, complicated, and relatively rare phenomenon, the experience of living undiagnosed or incorrectly diagnosed is not. Ridge has it right. People are going to her as a last resort, usually after seeing a revolving door of health care providers. These people are experiencing something excruciating, and yet their condition remains medically unexplained. Much of the academic and scientific literature on delusional infestation comes from people like Ridge, who learn how best to respond through trial and error and pass that knowledge to others. This is not technically part of our job, she said. Jody Green, an entomologist at the University of Nebraska, who sees delusional infestation cases. But if we know that people can turn a corner and get better, and if they get some help quickly, then we should be able to be part of that. Over the years, delusional infantation has gone by several names, including delusional parasistosis and Ekbom syndrome. Cases are often classified as either primary or secondary. A diagnosis of primary delusional infestation typically requires that the symptoms persist for more than a month, that the person who has never been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and that he or she is otherwise physically functional. A substantial proportion of cases appear to be secondary, meaning they are experienced alongside or by a consequence of an underlying medical, psychiatric, or drug-related problem. Many experts feel delusional infantation as existing as a spectrum, ranging from brief and minimally disruptive to life-destroying. Dr. John Cole, a dermatologist and psychiatrist at the University of California and one of the few medical experts who regularly take on these cases, helped develop the system to track the progressions of the disease. At one end is essentially normal behavior, at the other is terminal delusion, a trajectory he described as a descent into hell. In 2024, Rich Koo and several others published a comprehensive guide to delusional infantation for residents, entomologists, and other insect experts. The hope was to raise awesome awareness of the condition and ideally prompt a bigger network of support inside the medical establishment, something that has so far been a struggle. I'm sorry, editorial comment, we can't find more happy things, but I guess that's how it is. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from Sunday, March 15th issue of the New York Times Opinion section. We read from the New York Times Opinion section every Sunday at 2 p.m. Your reader has been Dick Shanley, and thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, followed at 4 by a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Please stay for these readings and more throughout the day, and feel free to contact us with your comments, suggestions, with any questions you may have. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which